What's good, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Terminator Training Show, Q&A edition. If you want your questions answered on a show like this in the future, give me a follow at Terminator_training and take a look out for my usually bi-weekly Ask Me Anything on my Instagram stories. Sometimes I get to a bunch of them on Instagram and then some more here on the show. This week is going to be more here on the show, less, if any, on Instagram just for time constraints. Got some clients coming into town and we're going to meet up and train today. And they are actually going to David Walton's muster this weekend. So I'm unable to go out to that, but they are here already. So we're going to meet up and train. Going to be a good time. But I won't get a chance to answer a ton of questions on IG. So hopefully if you ask your question this week, you will see them on here. I definitely won't get to all of them. And I posted the question, Ask Me Anything, very shortly ago. So there are not many, but they trickle in pretty quickly. So I'll refresh it a couple of times and we'll get to plenty of solid questions during this episode. And before we hop in, it is currently Memorial Day weekend. And if you are listening to this the day it comes out, the day after, or the day after, basically anytime before midnight on Monday, 26 May, Memorial Day, at, I guess, 11:59 p.m., then you can hop on the website. There's a link in the description, and all of the programs are automatically discounted to 30% off. All 8 TTM PDF products are included in that sale. And again, that sale will last till the end of the day on the 26th of May. So act quickly if you want to get fit this summer, whether it's a hybrid plan or get jacked with a hypertrophy plan, or if you have a garage gym and you want a more full body approach, hop on Kickstart. And if you are heavily obligated by your life, you don't have much time, Time Crunch program is the solution for you. That is a sleeper program, by the way. I get lots of DMs from people that follow it, whether they follow it all the time or they just follow for short periods of time when they just have more obligations in their lives. And they say it's a great program and they make awesome gains, and they've never thought you could actually get a good solid training session in like 20 minutes. And you definitely can. And you can do it without breaking the rules of strength and conditioning, which most time crunch style programs do, where they just throw out everything and it's get as tired as humanly possible over the next 20 or 30 minutes, which anyone can really program for that. And just because you're getting tired and sore and smoked does not necessarily mean you're doing anything properly. So Time Crunch program, if you have a lot going on and you don't have much time to train, that's your best option. And there's also an option for more volume on days you do have a little bit more time. And of course, to recover from all that stuff, that's important too. Equally important, if not more, especially given people's tendencies these days to not really recover very well. Believe me, I've been there. When I was a young kid, I didn't really take recovery all that seriously, and you can get away with it, but just because you can get away with something does not necessarily mean it's a good idea. So to equip yourself with the tools necessary and the strategies necessary to sleep well, eat well, fuel your training, hydrate well around training, and other miscellaneous recovery methods, go ahead and check out the recovery guide. It's a 67-page ebook. So all 30% off. Check those out if you're interested. Let's hop into today's questions. First question, coming off shoulder surgery, any advice on still making progress in recovery? Yes. So I'm not going to necessarily talk about your shoulder rehab. I would highly recommend doing that through a physical therapist. I'm assuming if you just had surgery, you've got that locked down. And because I don't know any details about you or what your surgery was or how long your recovery is or what your restrictions are, I'm going to keep it to making progress in general, not necessarily rehabbing that shoulder specifically. So as I go through, it'll kind of make more sense. Ideally, you provide yourself access to some machines, a fully stocked gym with some machines, because if you think about it, a lot of lower and upper body lifts with free weights are going to involve the shoulder regardless. You know, if you're doing barbell rows, dumbbell rows, or presses or squats or hinges, those are all going to involve the shoulder to some extent. Even if they're not shoulder exercises, you still have to have mobile and capable and stable shoulders in order to do those. So ideally you have some machines. That way you can have some stability provided for you by the machine, and you don't have to worry about potentially a little bit of crossover effect or the ability for your shoulder to do the right thing on certain exercises because you're locked into a machine. So you can do any sort of lower body machine. I would say great options for squats would be a belt squat. You don't really have to hold on to anything. You can hold on to the handles if you can, or you can hold on with your good arm to one of the handles, or you can just go free weight. You don't have to hold on to the handles on a belt squat. Most people do, and I like doing it, but you don't have to, and you can still get great stimulus out of it. Other leg machines typically are going to involve some sort of shoulder component. So if you think about a hack squat, you have the pads on your shoulders, the pendulum squat as well. If you can do that, like if you're further along in your recovery and you don't mind a little bit of pressure on top of your shoulder, like on your trap area, then those would be great options. If not, I would probably stick to the belt squat. You could also do some single leg movements. Maybe you have some sort of Smith machine or a Rogers squat machine, which are pretty uncommon, but they're great machines. They're kind of like Smith machines, except a little bit better. You basically just use your good arm and put the bar or the pads over your back, and then you can do single leg stuff, whether it's reverse lunges or split squats. You could do it too, where you just hold a dumbbell with your good arm and kind of let your other arm lay dormant. Balance can be an issue with that, so I like machines, and you don't want to fall over and not be able to catch yourself or fall over onto your bad shoulder. So ideally use one of those machines that I listed. But for hinging's a little bit more tough, because you're going to have, for most hinges, you're going to have a bar in your hands, or barbells in your hands, or you're going to have to hold on to something. So what you can do is like an upper body hinge. You can do a 45-degree back raise with your I'm assuming maybe you have like a sling on or something like that. And you just get into the 45-degree back raise machine. And although it's more of an upper body hinge, it still works the hinge muscles, the hamstrings, the glutes, lower back, etc. So that's a pretty good option. You can do some hip thrusts, not technically a hinge, but definitely usually pretty shoulder friendly, especially if you have a hip thrust machine, which are a little less common in gyms, but they're becoming more common just because they're so much more convenient than using a barbell. You probably could use a barbell, just be kind of a pain in the ass, whether you're injured or not, to break it down and put it back up. For upper body, obviously you're going to have to stick to training the good side. So single arm presses, single arm rows, single arm pull downs are going to be your bread and butter, whether you use dumbbells or machines or whatever you kind of fancy for those. And a lot of people are a little bit worried about, well, if I get strong and jacked with my good side, isn't that just going to make my imbalances more significant? Like once I can start using my recovered side again, my injured side. And that is a valid concern. But actually, I can't remember what the principle is called, but it's been studied where if you train the good side, there's a crossover effect systemically to the injured side. So although, yes, right when you get done and right when you're able to train that good side again, of course, it's going to be weaker. It would be anyway. Even if it wasn't injured, it would be weaker, but especially because it's injured. But it'll catch up faster because you're going to have a little bit of a crossover effect where you won't lose as much strength as you otherwise would if you didn't train your upper body at all. So consider that even if you do feel like you're really imbalanced, and you will be right after, it won't last as long. You'll be able to catch that arm up. If you do the right things, you'll be able to catch that injured side up to your good side much faster. And much faster is very different for everyone. It could be a couple of months. It could be longer than that. You might be, depending on what your injury was and what your surgery was, and whether that was your weak side or your good side previously, it might take quite a while to catch it up, but it shouldn't be super significant of a discrepancy after some time where you get back to normal training once you recover. So, of course, definitely listen to your body. Don't try and force anything. If one of those exercises I just mentioned doesn't really work well for you, of course. And also, I forgot isolation movements. You can do leg extensions, leg curls, bicep curls, tricep push downs with a good side, and other exercises like that, abs, core. But any of those things I just mentioned, if they bother you, definitely don't just take my word for it and drive through them. If something is bothering your shoulder, even if it's not supposed to, or you wouldn't think it would, if it is, totally not worth trying to continue with that exercise. There's other options. And of course, throughout this entire time, listen to your doctor and don't do anything too haphazard. The main goal should be to recover, but you can always do some form of training. And of course, you can definitely keep yourself aerobically fit by doing some sort of aerobic conditioning or multiple different types of aerobic conditioning. I'm guessing you probably can't run, at least first pretty early on, right after you get your surgery, but eventually you might be able to. But you could easily sit on a bike or hop on a Stairmaster or walk on an incline treadmill, and that probably would suffice. So yeah, man, best of luck. Hope the recovery goes well. and don't make the mistake that a lot of people do and just don't train at all. Obviously, you've got the right attitude. Like, how can I maintain and how can I get to where I am at least maximizing my ability to recover and stay fit throughout that time? So good on you for that. But just listen to your body and be patient. Don't try to rush anything and get back to full health as soon as possible. Next question, any plans on making a Ranger School program? Maybe sometime in the future, but it's not next or even close to next in the queue. I've talked about this in the past. It's kind of been a while, so I'll just rehash it. I personally don't think that you need a full-on Ranger School train-up. And what I mean by that is if you're generally fit as a tactical athlete, you should be able to go to Ranger School and pass rap week, even with very minimal specific training. So long as you're doing the right things in general year-round with your training. And any of my programs that involve strength and conditioning, whether it's the T850 training team on Train Heroic or the 2 and 5 mile run program or Jack Gazelle or Jack Gazelle 2.0 or SFAS. SFAS would be kind of overkill for Ranger School. Like, you don't necessarily have to train that specifically as if you're going to selection and then you go to Ranger School instead. You'll definitely be ready, but I think personally one of those other options would be probably more reasonable. There are no specific RPFT events in any of those programs, so you might have to play a little bit of Tetris, and if you know you struggle with a certain event there, or as you get closer, you can kind of practice certain events from the RPFT, which off the top of my head, I couldn't even tell you what they are. I know there's a bunch of new stuff, so I'm sure if you're going to Ranger School, you're aware of them. But because you don't need to necessarily be super fit for the entirety of Ranger School, you really only need to be super fit for the first few days where you're doing all of your rap week assessments and fitness assessments. I don't think you really need to train that intensely or that specifically for it. For example, I found out I was going to Ranger School a few days prior to going to Ranger School, and my training was already sound enough to where I was able to show up and get major pluses on all of the gates during Ranger School. I think the major pluses, at least when we went, could be different now, especially with the new PT event, but if you ran your 5 mile in 33 minutes or faster, I believe it might have been 33:30, but I think it was 33 minutes or faster, you get a major plus. Major pluses, by the way, are positive spot reports. They're a really good thing to get because you can also get major minuses, which are negative spot reports, and the major pluses cancel the positive, the major minuses out. So, if you get 3 major pluses and 3 major minuses in one phase, you're basically at 0. So that's great. The thing about major minuses is if you get a net of 3 major minuses, you recycle that phase. So that's not what you want. Major pluses always help. Of course, you can go through gate week or rap week and get 0 major pluses, but also not get any major minuses. You'll be good then, but it always helps to have some in your back pocket just in case. I definitely benefited from that when I went through. And so I think it's 2.5 hours on the 12 mile ruck or less. I think the buddy run, I don't know if they still do the buddy run, but if you win the buddy run, you get one. Me and my partner won the buddy run going into Malvesti. And was there another? I think if you get all of your points during land nav, or at least that's what it was when I went through. If you get all your land nav points, you get a major plus. So anyway, good to be fit for that first week. But then after that, it's all just kind of trucking through the woods with your head down with a ruck on. Obviously not with your head down. Well, you're going to have your head down. You're not supposed to have your head down when you're patrolling, but fatigue and hunger and poopy facedness tends to cause that for a lot of guys. But anyway, as long as you can just continuously ruck, and I would definitely do some rucking as you go into Ranger School. That's kind of an implied task, but all those programs, you can definitely choose rucking from the programs I listed that are TTM programs, or really whatever you do leading in. And yeah, thereafter, everyone's kind of on the same playing field. Of course, it helps to have a higher level of fitness going in because then you have a higher ceiling from which to fall. But everyone's food deprived, everyone's sleep deprived, everyone's super stressed out, doesn't want to be there after a little while, and you just kind of got to go through it, and that's mostly mental fortitude, not necessarily finding the perfect fitness program, if that makes sense. So that would be my recommendation. Because the demand is high historically, a lot of people have asked this question. I might end up making a Ranger School prep program, a specific one, but as of now, it is not currently on the docket for upcoming programs. I will say the next program that's coming out, which hopefully will be around the end of June, maybe a little bit early July, that will be a run, ruck, lift program that could be used for Ranger School too. Definitely overkill for Ranger School also, just like SFAS. However, definitely an option. And that can be used for multiple different selections that are ruck based, whether you're going to SMU selection, SFAS, MARSOC, or RASP. All of those endeavors that program should apply to. So stay tuned for that, but that's what I would go for right now. And again, those programs are 30% off right now if you want to act on them. Next question, in your opinion, what's the best ruck and boots to buy for selection prep? Yeah, so I've talked about this several times in the past, but just to rehash it, for rucks, I would at least be able to familiarize yourself with a molly. So I guess if you are, for whatever reason, you don't have a molly right now, maybe you haven't joined yet or something like that, then actually, if you're about to join and you're going, say, 18 X-ray, and you just are trying to train before you go to OSIT, then you could consider getting a non-molly ruck. That way you have a backup ruck to kind of use throughout your career. Hopefully you get selected and you can use any ruck you want later in the Q course as well as throughout your career. In that case, I would get something like a Malice pack or an Alice pack because they are higher quality rucks than molly. Although you will have to bring a molly to selection. But the main reason I sometimes recommend getting a different ruck is because you're going to get a molly anyway. They're going to give you a molly once you get into the Army. So you're going to be plenty familiar with that molly before you get to selection. So you're going to have to use that ruck at selection. Molly 2 would be a better option than the 4K just for carrying apparatuses. It's a better setup. However, if for whatever reason, maybe you're in a different branch of service, maybe you're doing a service transfer, or you have a National Guard assignment where they don't give you a ruck for whatever reason and you're prepping, then maybe I would consider getting a molly. I would absolutely consider getting a molly. That way you can familiarize yourself with it before you go and break it in and get used to it. The thing about mollies is they wear down pretty easily, especially the strap fasteners. So if you wear it over and over and over again in preparation for selection, you might notice that over time, the strap fasteners you have to cinch them down all the time because they loosen and loosen. And it's really annoying. And if you show up to selection and you're already worn down, your ruck's already worn down like that, it's just going to be a nightmare. You're going to have to do it the entire time, then add extra weight to it with team week. And it just becomes really, really annoying and it becomes a nuisance. So as long as you're familiar with that ruck, doesn't really matter what you train up with. And like I said, in that case, I would probably recommend a Malice or an Alice pack. Those are both really solid options. And the great thing about that is once you get through the Q course, or honestly, once you get to Robin Sage, when I went through, we were allowed to wear our own rucks in Robin Sage. You'll be able to wear whatever ruck you want. You'll be able to wear your Malice pack or your Alice pack, and life will be good for you. And you won't really have to think about your molly anymore. But either way, specificity does matter, but being too specific in such a way that it like wears it down is probably not a great option. For boots, it's totally personal preference. Whatever you do, just decide on a pair of boots, try them out, and break them in and break your feet in. In the history of selection, no one has ever not made it because they got the wrong boots or they got the suboptimal boots. Lots of people have not made it because they either danced around and couldn't decide on boots and they got a boot too late and they weren't able to break it in and their feet weren't used to them. So they got crazy fucked up blisters and feet. That's not good. But so long as you get a pair of boots and a backup pair and you wear both of them, at least enough to break them in, and your feet get used to where they rub inside, and you toughen up your feet over time by continuing to use them and training them, then you're going to be totally fine. I personally really used to love the Nikes, the old Nikes. The newer Nikes are not great, so that's probably not a great option. But a lot of people like the Garmont NFSs. A lot of people like the Go Ruck. I think they are I can't remember exactly what they're called, but they are created by Go Ruck, and lots of people like those. Aside from that, Rockies are really good boots. Belleville makes some good boots. And I'm trying to rack my brain with the other brands. I don't really think much about boots just because it doesn't really matter all that much. What matters is the things I told you to do. So whatever you do, buy 2 pair, break them in, break your feet in, and show up and never think about it again, and you'll be good to go. Because as I always say, the best guys at selection, the guys who are truly prepared, could show up, and if the cadre on day one decide to have the entire class wear Crocs, they could still make it because they have done all of the really, really important things to prepare in general. That's kind of tongue-in-cheek, of course, but still, like, the boots don't matter all that much. It's the person wearing the boots, just like any other piece of equipment. Think of shooting. If 2 people are shooting at the range, and one person really, really sucks ass, but he has the nicest setup, the nicest gun, the nicest optic. Everything on that gun is like top of the line, super expensive, really, really nice. And the guy next to him has kind of a shitty gun, maybe even has iron sights, and really not a lot of features on the gun, super, super low grade. That guy's still going to outshoot the guy with the really, really good gun, because it's not the gun, it's the shooter. Of course, if the really good shooter had a really nice gun, he would outshoot the other guy by even more. However, that is kind of an analogy I like to use for boots and equipment. Most of the time, guys who are really, really wrapped around the axle with equipment end up kind of lacking in the things that are most important, the skill and the capability and the competence. So always remember that, but whatever you choose, just make sure you're familiar with it. Boots, ruck, and go and smash. Really focus on your training and you'll be good to go. Next question, peptides results. Okay, so I am currently taking TB 500 and BPC 157 to help with my calf recovery, which is going really, really well. I have gone on at least 5 runs where I have had zero pain in the calf, and I haven't had to take any walk breaks. I started with like walk runs. I would do like 3-minute run, 2-minute walk, 3-minute run, 2-minute walk. Then I would go 4 in 1 minute. Then I would go like 8 minutes and 2 minutes. And I finally worked my way up to just running on all my runs. Now I'm doing strides. I'm doing pickups. I haven't done any speed work yet. I haven't done any road running yet. I'm doing it all on soft surfaces. Bunch of incline walking on my treadmill as well. Great way to get zone 2 in with a very low impact component. And like I said, my calf feels great. However, is it 100% the peptides? I'm not sure, because I took a lot of time off from running. So when you take time off from a running injury, generally it's going to get better anyway. So I don't really have a control group to compare if it would have still gotten better without the peptides, or if the peptides are a main contributor to the fact that it's gotten better. In reality, it's very likely a combination of both, but I don't unfortunately have like a definitive answer for it. I personally would absolutely use peptides again if I get some sort of injury like that, definitely. But I can't 100% say like it's definitely the peptides. And, you know, if I had started to run too early, or if I did too much too soon or something like that, I would probably have another answer for you. It might be like, yeah, the peptides aren't really working. Or it could just be the fact that I started running too soon. Like, they're not a get out of jail free card. They help speed the process up, but they are not just a free for all to just do whatever you want as you recover your injury. So, or I could have just injured another part of my body for like trying to compensate with it, or just being stupid. And I am kind of over my phase of being really, really dumb. I, of course, had to be dumb enough to hurt myself, and stubborn enough and biased enough to just keep running. And I ended up injured. But recovery wise, I don't want to be injured all summer. I want to get back to where I can go and do and be confident with my ability to do any type of run on any surface at any intensity. And I'm not going to get my mileage way up 60 plus like I was when I got hurt, but I'd like to get back into that 20 to 25 miles per week range, do some speed work, do some fartleks, tempos, long runs. And so far things are looking pretty good, but can't really give you a definitive answer on whether it was the peptides, the time off. I would guess it's probably a solid combination of both. Next question, fruit/berries or granola bar/cereal as PWO. PWO could either be post-workout or pre-workout. I'd say post-workout. Doesn't matter all that much, although honestly, pre-workout meals and post-workout meals can look very, very similar. So we'll just consider it pre and post-workout. Either way, the thing about fruit is great. So I don't want you to think that I'm saying not to eat fruit or avoid fruit, or that you can't eat fruit pre-workout or post-workout, because you absolutely can. The thing about it, though, is it replenishes liver glycogen before it replenishes muscle glycogen, especially if you're eating fruit by itself and you're not mixing it with anything else like other carbohydrates. So what you want to do pre-workout as well as post-workout is you want to top your glycogen stores off, and post-workout, you want to replenish them as quickly as possible, but your muscle glycogen stores. Liver can only hold about 80 grams of glycogen, whereas muscle glycogen, depending on your size and depending on your stature and a few other things, can be 400, 500, 600 grams of glycogen, which is a massive difference. And muscle glycogen is more applicable to performance. And so what I would do is focus on other things that are not fructose based for glycogen filling and glycogen refilling. However, fructose mixed with another form of sugar is a great option. So what I would do is have some cereal with fruit before you lift or after you lift. That would be a great option because you're getting that non-fructose form of carbohydrates in the form of cereal, hopefully something rice-based or something that digests really, really quickly. It could even be like a more sugary cereal. Rice Krispies are great. Even frosted Rice Krispies are great around your workout, especially if you're lean and you're training really hard. But you can just mix those two together and you're going to be good to go. The other thing about fruit pre-workout is fiber. So you want to usually keep your fiber pretty low, especially if you're eating close to training. Now, if this meal is occurring 90 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours out, totally fine to have higher fiber and higher fat. But the closer you are eating to your training session, the lower you want to keep that fiber, also the fat, which neither of these fat is super concerning because they're mostly just carbohydrates. You can get higher fat cereal, but if you go with the rice-based stuff, it'll be low fat. So anyway, that's how I would go about choosing it. Is it going to kill you to eat a banana before your workout and go train or after your workout? No. Bananas also are kind of lower fiber fruits compared to some other fruits, but I would consider a mix of both. That way you're getting your glycogen stores completely topped off and you're refilling them as quickly as possible afterwards. And the best option for that would be something rice-based or really fast digesting carbohydrate, in which case you could go with cereal. And then if you top that with fruit, totally fine. Just note that like if you have a ton of berries like 20 minutes before your workout, if you lift, not quite as problematic, but if you're going for a run or some sort of cardio, it can kind of weigh you down a little bit and it'll still be digesting the entire time that you're running, and it just most likely won't be fun. It might cause GI issues just because it slows that digestion down. So those are things to consider, but no perfect route for it, kind of whatever you want, but just fruit. Also fruit, you'd have to eat a ton of fruit to get a lot of carbohydrates. You could eat a bowl of Rice Krispies and you get 80 to 100 grams of carbohydrates like pretty damn quickly, and it digests really fast. To get 80 to 100 grams of carbohydrates with fruit, you'd have to have like 3 or 4 bananas. You'd have to have a ridiculous amount of berries. And not that that's the perfect amount for everyone to eat every time they work out or after they work out, but just in general, it's hard to get your carbs up with just fruit, and you're going to be bringing a lot of fiber along the way with you, and that may not be super comfortable for your training. Next question. I have AA during selection prep. AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, or air assault is probably what he's talking about. I have air assault during selection prep. Week 2 to 3 out of 12. Do I skip 2 weeks or work out after class? Yes. It depends on how you're feeling. Depends on what air assault looks like. I've never been, so I don't know what the days look like. I would say don't skip things, but you might have to make some adjustments. You probably will have to make some adjustments to the program, especially if you're doing mandatory PT, or if sleep is kind of a premium, or if it's just a really high stress school, or if it's just long hours and you don't have much time to get training in. But usually I wouldn't recommend just completely skipping it. I would kind of see what you're doing for required PT and listen to your body. Check out your schedule. If your schedule is conducive for you to train afterwards and you're doing that and not sacrificing sleep or nutrition or your sanity, then maybe get workouts in after class or before class. Maybe do some long stuff on the weekends. I would definitely consider doing some of the long stuff on the weekends. I think Air Assault has a 12-mile ruck to finish off, so I would try and go into that fresh and maybe take a couple easy days going in. But that would be my best recommendation, probably better than just taking that time off, unless, of course, you're doing like ridiculously demanding PT and you're not recovering well. Then that would be a kind of an exception. And then you could start back where you left off. But not a huge deal. There are worse things to do during selection prep for your potential preparedness than air assault school. So you should be totally fine. Even if you do skip those 2 weeks, not a huge deal. But ideally, you get a little bit of something in and go from there. Next question, is playing golf a good swap out for a ruck? No, absolutely not. I'm not saying to not play golf, but it's by no means even close to a good swap for a ruck. Now, if you're carrying your golf bag and you're walking 18 holes, that's pretty solid. Like I wouldn't, if you have a long ruck plan that day and you do that, I would not do the entire ruck and the entire round of golf. That would probably be kind of overkill unless you're just in crazy shape or you're doing this intentionally, like to overreach a little going into a deload week. That would be a little much, but it's not 1-to-1 for sure. Like golf bags are probably anywhere between 20 and 30 pounds. and you're walking slow and leisurely and you're stopping every so often. So you're not going to get the same adaptations, the same benefits as you would with actually rucking. If I were you and you want to play golf, say on a day that you have a ruck, instead of replacing it, I would just get a cart and play golf in your cart. You're still going to get a ton of steps, even with a cart, and you're going to enjoy your golf. And then you can finish your golf and go ruck, or a ruck before your golf, instead of doing both and walking 18 holes and also doing your ruck. Or, if you want to walk 18 and you put the bag on your back, you can just cut your ruck down a little bit, or maybe even a lot, because that's a long time to be out there. But you're just not going to get the specific adaptations you want. You're also not going to be in the same footwear that you would wear for your rucks. Most likely you're in your golf shoes. So lots of different variables that would make them not a great one-to-one swap. But I would either do both, or I would do one where you just ride in a cart, or you could maybe play golf on a different day and not have to worry about doubling them up. Next question, how much of a detriment is BJJ or MMA on your ability to make gains while training? Yeah, this will depend on lots and lots and lots of different factors. Mainly how often you're doing BJJ/MMA. If you're doing it 5-6 days a week, it's absolutely going to interfere with your, especially strength gains. I mean, you're going to get plenty of cardiovascular. You're probably doing some cardiovascular training alongside it if you're that into it. And obviously a lot of MMA sessions, BJJ sessions are solid cardio stimuli. But lifting wise, it will interfere, especially if you also try to lift just like you otherwise would and you don't trim any fat. Doing a lot of MMA or any sort of martial art throughout the week, 5-6 days a week, even 4 days a week, requires you to trim some fat from your other training. If you just follow like Jack Gazelle or another program of mine, plus do all that BJJ and MMA, you're going to most likely really struggle. And not only with your gains, your fitness gains from the program, but also it's going to interfere with your ability to do your MMA or BJJ the way you want to. So that's just kind of a fatigue fest. Now, if you're only doing it like once or twice a week just to kind of maintain, that's a different story. You can absolutely make great gains doing a reasonable sound fitness program along with doing those couple of sessions per week. Absolutely. But even beyond that, it still depends on what you do outside the gym, your recovery habits. It depends on your genetics. It depends on your nutrition, your stress management, how much you sleep, your job and life obligations, and so on and so forth. Just lots and lots of different factors. So TLDR is, if you're doing lots of BJJ and MMA, cut back on the other training, because it doesn't take much to maintain that strength and that muscle and your general fitness, but it can easily go overboard if you're just doing too much of both. Whereas other option, if you're doing it a little bit less or quite a bit less, a couple times a week, you should be fine to generally follow a full program, but you also should listen to your body the entire time and make adjustments as necessary. I would really ask yourself which one's most important to you. If BJJ, MMA are top priorities and fitness is a little bit less, then focus on BJJ, MMA. If it's the opposite, then focus a little more on fitness and dial back your BJJ a little bit. But unfortunately, we can't just recover from absolutely everything. And so at some point, you're going to have to make some sort of sacrifice, make some adjustments, move things around, and always check in with yourself to see how you're recovering, because, what might be great for you at one time may not be great for you at another time, because you have a bunch of life obligations and you're not sleeping very well. What may be great for you may not be great for a friend of yours. What a professional MMA fighter might do is probably not the same thing that would benefit you. So very individual, lots of different potential nuances that go into it. But listening to your body is a commonly overlooked skill, but it will go a long way for you. Next question. If I have low T now, but want to go to selection in the next 2 years, should I do TRT until then or not until after? I probably would recommend trying to naturally get your testosterone up between now and then. There are lots and lots and lots of different lifestyle factors that you can implement in order to improve your testosterone levels. And a lot of people will kind of skip over those and they'll go on TRT. And that can be detrimental, because TRT, although it'll help you with certain things, it's not just a get out of jail free card. It won't undo all of your other health issues that are often accompanied by low T, that are often caused by poor lifestyle habits or poor training habits, poor nutrition habits, poor sleep habits, lots and lots of stress, unmanaged stress. So what I would do is really, really focus on trying to get your levels up naturally, especially if you're younger. Because if you go on TRT for 2 years, yes, you will feel better, you will recover better, you'll be able to train more, you'll have more drive, all these different benefits of being on testosterone or having high testosterone, whether you're on it synthetically or whether you just naturally have high testosterone. However, you're going to have to come off it. I'm not sure when you'll have to come off it, whether it's like before basic and all the way till after selection, or if it's just maybe if it's prescribed, you can use it during basic training. I'm not really sure what the regulations are on that. I'm not the person to ask. But either way, you're going to have to go off it. And when you go off TRT, especially if you've been using it for a couple of years, your body is not going to immediately start producing testosterone on its own. It's going to take quite a while, especially if you go on TRT and, like I said, you don't have those lifestyle habits and you're not doing the right things to be healthy in general beforehand, and you don't have those habits built. It's going to be a major struggle, and you're going to be not feeling very good, not performing very well, and it would be the last resort that I recommend. So, of course, if you try all these lifestyle interventions, or if you have some sort of underlying issue, maybe like a bunch of TBIs or other issue that you have done something in the past that basically makes it so that no matter what you do, you're going to have low T, which is absolutely a thing. It's not common, but it is a thing. Then that might be another consideration. Going on TRT will probably help you, but I would do everything you possibly can to get your levels up naturally and maybe consider it afterwards. But even during the Q course, there's logistical hoops you'll have to jump through for being able to stay on it and not having to go on and off and on and off, which is kind of a nightmare. You're going to feel really good when you're on, you're going to feel terrible when you're off, and it's just not that awesome. So lifestyle interventions, honestly, they are very, very simple. They're just not easy. And that's the main reason most people just kind of immediately turn to TRT, which is not a terrible thing. But if you don't have them in check beforehand, again, it's just not going to solve all the problems you think it's going to solve. So getting really good sleep, managing your stress really well, strength training, doing conditioning, but not too much conditioning, basically doing enough training for progress and results and well-being, but not so much training that you're just overdoing it and you're always in a recovery debt. Nutrition is huge. Not being overweight. If you have fat to lose, definitely getting leaner. You don't want to get crazy lean, but down in that 10 to 12% body fat range is usually a pretty damn good spot. For some people, 10, just under 10 is a little bit rough on the hormones. You might need to be up closer to that 12, 13%. For other people, you can get down to 10 or 12 and your hormones are going to be as good as they possibly can be given the entirety of your life. So that's what I would recommend. I just don't think it's a great idea. Then again, you're an adult and you can make your own decisions, but you've got my viewpoints on it and some of the things you might struggle with if you do decide to hop on. Next question, what would be your grip training protocol to be ready for team week? You want to think, especially as you get closer, you want to think very specifically. So for the most part, you're going to be carrying loads of approximately 45 to 55-ish pounds. And that's going to be a multitude of different things. You don't have to get so specific where you're actually carrying the actual things you're going to be using at selection, like water cans and ammo cans and things like that. But weight-wise, you want to be relatively specific. A lot of people will go and do really heavy carries all the way up to selection. And what that's doing is it's more fatiguing to carry super heavy loads. It's going to be more spinal loading. It's going to be more CNS fatigue because doing tons and tons of grip, especially heavy grip training, can really fatigue the CNS, especially in the context of all the other training that you're going to be doing during this time. So keeping it specific is anywhere between 45 and 55 pounds. You want to do probably 2/3 suitcase carries, so one hand at a time, 1/3 farmer's carries, 2 hands at a time. They both carry over pretty well, but you're going to do more one-handed carries at selection than two-handed carries. But either one and both of them are probably pretty good. Just favor the suitcase. And you can use kettlebells, you can use dumbbells, you can use any sort of like those torpedoes that they have in the gym that are just basically made for carries. And then for farmer's carries, you can use a hex bar if you want. Whatever, doesn't matter as long as you have like the loading right. And then usually what I would do is probably 2 to 3 days per week. You could either have one day where you do strongman work only. So maybe you do a big medley of suitcase carries, drags, sled pushes, maybe some sandbag carries in a Zercher position over your shoulder, Maybe for some people, some yoke carries, if you are capable of doing that and you don't go overboard with it, yoke carries can be great to kind of get ready for the high carries that you'll do at selection. But something like that where you just have a running clock, say it's 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, and you just rotate through each of those exercises, you get lots and lots of carry volume built up. On your other training days, maybe on one day you do this earlier in your workout, maybe on the other day you do it after, or you can kind of do it both of them later in the workout. Going into carries a little bit fatigued is totally fine because you're going to be super fatigued when you're doing it. But you do something like, hey, over the next 15 minutes, I'm going to carry these 50-pound dumbbells for the maximum distance I possibly can. And then maybe next week I'll try and beat it. You're resting as needed. You're not going to be able to carry it for the entire 15 minutes, but you are accumulating 15 minutes total of carries. You don't necessarily have to start with that. I'd probably start lower just because that's going to smoke you, but you just work your way up. Usually I start my guys at like 8 minutes and then we go up by a minute or two every week or every other week. And that's a great option. And then you can do like work rest periods. So maybe you do like 15 sets of 45 seconds on, 15 seconds off. That's a good option. And the number of sets that I'm saying is just an example. Again, I probably would not start with 15 seconds or 15 rounds. And then for suitcase carries, another thing I like to do is just a density set. Like, hey, grab this 50-pound kettlebell and carry it as far as you can, switching hands and or resting as necessary for the next 12 minutes or the next 15 minutes, whatever it is. That way you are, when you're doing this suitcase carries, you are going to rest less, of course, than you would when you were doing a farmer's carry because you're going to be able to switch hands. But 15 minutes straight is pretty long, even with 50 pounds for a suitcase carry. You're probably going to have to rest a little bit, but it shouldn't be quite as much. You can just switch back and forth. And also I would consider bringing in some fat grips, at least for some of those carries. So fat grips will get you ready for carrying the bigger poles that you'll have to carry for some of the events. You're mostly going to be carrying small diameter things, but the bigger poles are going to be a factor at some point. And if all you ever carry is kettlebells and dumbbells, especially if you have smaller hands or just a generally weak grip in general, which there's a lot of genetic component to grip strength, but it can of course be trained. But if you're not used to that bigger diameter at all by using fat grips, it might be a struggle for you. That actually gets a lot of guys. And the last thing is more of not necessarily a grip strength thing, but a grip technique that I highly recommend getting used to, and that is the hook grip. If you can master the hook grip and get your thumb to where it's resilient enough where you can just hook grip something forever, which is a hook grip is basically, if you're watching on video, you can see this, but you wrap your hand around the bar or the kettlebell or the dumbbell, whatever it is, and you create friction between your index finger and your thumb. And it's a very secure grip, but it's not a strong grip. For example, I can hook grip my deadlift 550 pounds. And a lot of people think like, wow, you have crazy grip strength because you're double overhanding that. No, I'm not. I could probably double overhand a deadlift maybe for like 350, which is 200 pounds less than my hook grip. And that is because the hook grip is very secure and it doesn't really matter how strong your grip is. It has to be decently strong, but it doesn't have to be that strong for you to carry something for a really, really long time in a super secure position. Hook grip is definitely easier when you have chalk, but also you're not going to have chalk at selection, but also you can, if you're hot and your hands are sweating, you can rub some dirt and sand on them. And although it's nowhere near chalk, it's definitely better than just having super sweaty hands. It creates some friction. And so that hook grip would be a great, great thing to learn and get used to. And I say learn it because it takes a little while. When you first do hook grips, you can do this when you're doing deadlifts. You can do this when you're doing carries, depending on how big your hands are and depending on how big the diameter of what you're carrying is. Some people, it may be a little bit less possible, but you can find something to do in training that is small enough diameter enough for you to get your hook grip built up. And building up your hook grip really just comes down to getting your thumb to where it's tough enough for you to hold it. Because at first it's going to be super duper painful and it's not fun, but the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it, the less of a problem it's going to be on your thumb. And I absolutely can't emphasize enough learning the hook grip because you're going to get to selection. And if you're carrying a jerry can, the diameter of that handle is tiny and you're easily going to be able to hook grip it. Or the ammo crates that have the rope handles, that is a super tiny diameter too. And you could easily hook grip that and carry it forever. And it has almost nothing to do with grip strength. It's all getting your thumb broken in. So that is the way I would approach it. Of course, you can do other stuff like plate pinch carries. You can do plate pinches where you just hold still. You can do dead hangs. I would recommend doing some dead hangs. You can, if you really need extra grip work, you can do captains of crush grippers. I really don't think that's all that necessary, But the main thing is to focus on grip strength endurance, not just grip strength. So being able to carry the weights that I was referring to earlier, 45, 55 pounds for a long period of time, rather than being able to pick up super heavy loads and just carry them for like 10 yards or 15 yards. That's pure grip strength. That's not grip strength endurance. And you can definitely do heavier carries too. Generally, I like to do those further out from selection prep to really get that grip strength. And then as you get closer, more specific is always a good thing as you're getting closer. And that would be a little lighter and longer, much longer. So 2 to 3 days a week, probably pretty good. You know, if you really, really lack grip strength, you could do maybe 4 days a week. But it is easy to overdo grip. Definitely, like, listen to your body and don't just grip it and rip it and just not even think about your fatigue, your general fatigue, and make sure you're actually progressing over time and not just going backwards. So lots of different factors, but specificity is key. And if you just consistently, progressively carry things over time, you're going to be set up for success. Next question. Have you ever had one of your athletes have a drastic increase in hunger for a period of time, and why? Although I don't really have any specific examples, there are definitely some reasons why you might be more hungry than you usually are. One, if you're eating less, if you're trying to eat in a calorie deficit, there's going to be hunger involved in that. It's almost impossible to eat in a deficit for a long period of time without ever feeling hungry. And that's okay. Being hungry is all right. And honestly, most people don't even know what it feels like to be hungry unless you've done like intentional intermittent fasting, or if you've been to some sort of school like Ranger School or SEER School where you're legitimately freaking hungry. Most people don't really know what true hunger feels like. A lot of people think that hunger is they are craving something. There's a difference between hunger and craving. Hunger is physiological. You have physical signs that you are hungry. The main difference that I like to use to differentiate hunger and cravings is if you're hungry, you will literally eat anything. And the thought of having like a plain steak with no salt on it, or a plain chicken breast with no salt on it, or a bowl of vegetables, very, very plain stuff like that, whole foods, very high nutrient dense foods. If you're hungry, you will absolutely eat that in a second. Even foods you don't like. If you're hungry, you're going to eat them. If you're having a craving, those things don't sound good to you. And whatever you're craving, usually some processed food that is literally designed to make you crave them, that sounds good, but you really wouldn't touch a steak or something like that if it was put in front of you because you're not actually hungry, you're having a craving. So that is a little off topic, but that's kind of the way I differentiate the two. But other things that can cause increases in appetite, even if you're not in a calorie deficit, if you start to strength train, especially, and your body wants to build muscle is an expensive tissue. And that means that in order to support muscle growth and muscle maintenance and also support your daily life when you have more muscle on you, you're going to need more calories. And that's totally normal. A lot of people start lifting and they start getting hungry and they're kind of worried about it. As long as you're not going crazy overboard and you use that hunger versus cravings test and you stick to mostly non-processed foods that aren't designed to make you overeat them, then that's totally fine. You're going to eat those extra calories. It's going to support your growth. And in the future, you're going to have a better functioning metabolism, higher metabolic rate, and be able to cut more easily. But other things that can increase hunger, doing a lot of cardio. If you just started to do like a lot more cardio, you ramp that up, then that's just going to burn more calories. And cardio often has almost like an exponential effect on your hunger. So say you go do cardio for an hour or so, you burn 400 calories, whatever you're doing. It's super easy to eat 400 calories. Although it may take you like an hour to burn 400 calories, you could eat that in a minute or less. So that's one thing. But also usually that for some people, this is not the case for everyone, but for a lot of people, when they do cardio, the appetite increase is more exponential. So even though they burn 400 calories, they're going to want to eat 600, 800, 900 calories to kind of make up for it. And that's not great. So although cardio can be a decent adjunct for short periods of time to get leaner, like if you're prepping for a bodybuilding show or you're prepping to go on vacation, you want to be super duper lean, implementing some cardio can be a good idea. Using it for long term is a great idea for health and performance, but also remember that it's going to increase your appetite. So if you're trying to lose weight and you're just cardioing, you're not going to have a very good time. And there's lots of other negative detrimental effects of doing too much cardio and also combining that with a calorie deficit. You're just going to be starving all the time, but all the things going on inside your body hormonally and general health wise, metabolically are not good either. So overdoing cardio can cause that. But even just starting to do cardio when you're not used to it can result in some hunger. Aside from that, there are definitely other considerations that can make you hungry. Like if you've just started to do something different, whatever that different thing may be, whether you started to take a new medication or you change something about your life, or maybe you're not sleeping as well. That's another huge one. Sleep is massive for being able to control your hunger. There are two hunger hormones that sleep significantly affects. One is ghrelin. Ghrelin is a hormone that goes up when you are hungry or when you're approaching a meal, or when you're just not eating enough, you're going to have high ghrelin. Some people have higher ghrelin. It's genetic than others. Other people don't. But no matter what, ghrelin is affected by sleep. So if you get a shitty night of sleep, you're going to have higher ghrelin. Also, leptin is the hormone that your body releases when it's well fed enough. So you release leptin after a meal, and that kind of tells your body, okay, we're good. We don't have to eat anymore. And if you don't sleep well, or if you don't sleep enough, especially if you do it chronically, your leptin is going to be way low. So high ghrelin, which is high I'm hungry hormone, low leptin, which is, hey, I'm no longer hungry, I just ate enough hormone, both affected by sleep in negative ways. And coincidentally, people who don't sleep very well often struggle to manage their hunger and therefore manage their body composition. Additionally, on the same topic of hormones, insulin, your insulin sensitivity is going to decrease after shitty sleep. So having low insulin sensitivity is not a great thing either, because your insulin is just not going to help you manage your blood sugar the way it usually does. And you're going to have bigger blood sugar swings. Like if you have a big ass meal and your blood sugar spikes, especially after a bad night of sleep, because your insulin's just not doing what it normally does anyway. And that dips back down again pretty quickly after that meal, you're going to be hungry again. And you're usually going to crave things. Oftentimes, blood sugar going up and down can be a big factor in craving versus hunger, but also you might just feel hungry too, like legitimately hungry. But oftentimes, if you just ate some sugar, it's really hard to eat a really sugary, shitty meal and then go and eat a steak when you're hungry again 30 minutes later. So consider that as well. Sleep, cardio, muscle, medications, different changes in your lifestyle could all be factors. It kind of just depends on which one of those applies to you the most. But so long as you're eating whole foods and prioritizing them, and you know that difference between hunger and cravings, then if your body is asking you to eat more food, you might need to eat more food. Unless, of course, you're just in a calorie deficit, then you might just have to accept the fact that you're going to be hungry sometimes. You shouldn't be hungry 100% of the time. You should not be starving. You shouldn't just be miserable all the time. If you are, you're in way too much of a calorie deficit, most likely. But a little bit of hunger is totally fine, not going to kill you. And if you have never done any sort of like prolonged periods without eating, maybe try that, especially if you're one of those people that just loses their mind when they're hungry. Being hungry is a natural human state of being, and so many people fear it. So many people think when they're hungry, everything's going to just come crashing down, or their muscle is just going to disappear off their body, and that's not what happens. I'm not saying to go intermittent fast all the time and just starve yourself, but if you've never been hungry before, you've never gone to one of those schools, or you've never tried to go 16, 18, 20 hours without fasting, doing that once in a while just to prove to yourself that it's very doable and you're going to live and you're going to be okay, despite the fact you might be hungry, is maybe a good idea. Next question, can you explain how to program for power, jumps, etc.? Yeah, I've talked about this quite a bit recently, but I will definitely rehash it because most people don't program it properly and it just becomes cardio, which is not the same as power. So generally speaking, with power, you want to limit fatigue. Your fatigue is not your friend. And I'm talking about like intraset fatigue. So if you're doing high reps of something for the development of power, you're kind of missing the forest for the trees, or if you're not resting for long enough in between and things like that. So for power, the principles of training power. One, you want to choose the right exercises. So there are so many different options for power development. You can do Olympic lifts if you're highly skilled in them, snatch, clean and jerk, clean variations. Most people are way better off probably skipping over those just in general. If you are proficient at them, totally fine. Great power exercises. You can do jumps. You can do skips. You can do hops. You can do throws. You can do fast lifting. So speed bench. You can do jumping push-ups. You can do where you get on a Smith machine and you have a really light load on the bar and you push up as hard as you can and it just goes up the rack and then you catch it almost like a jumping push-up, except you're using the Smith machine. I would not do that with a barbell for obvious reasons, but the Smith machine should be totally fine so long as you have like the stoppers in place. And if you happen to miss it, it's not going to come down and just smash your chest, but also you should have light load on it. Speed bench, speed squat, you can implement some chains and bands if you know how to set those up. Most people probably are totally fine without using those unless they know what they're doing or they have someone with them that knows what they're doing. But anything that is moving fast, whether it's just your body weight or whether it's an actual load, you don't necessarily want to use super duper high loads. So if you're doing like speed lifts, maybe 50 to 60% of your 1RM would be probably a solid load to use. So if you can bench press 300 pounds, you do speed bench with like 150 to 175 or something like that. Then you want to consider rep ranges, rest periods, and frequency. So power is one of the fastest adaptation. It's the fastest adaptation to detrain. So after 4 to 5 days of not doing any sort of power training, it's going to slowly start to decrease over time. And most people don't do any power training, but if you get power training in once a week, ideally even twice a week would be perfect, then you're going to be good to go. So I would recommend doing power earlier in your training session. You could do it either right after your warm up before you get into your main lifts. You could do it in between sets of a main lift. So if you're doing squats one day, maybe as you ramp up in between your ramp up sets to your work sets of squats, you do some jumps or skips or hops or jumping push-ups if you're doing like a full body day, whatever it is. Or you could do it during your main sets, in between your main sets. The big thing is just to make sure you're resting long enough. So if you're doing a set of heavy squats of say a set of 3 and you go straight into a power exercise and then you go straight back to your squats, you're not resting long enough. You're not really going to get much out of the squats or the power, the jumps. So the thing about power is it calls on the ATP PC energy system. So therefore you need to rest a certain period of time between sets. And a lot of people, like I said, mess this up by turning it into cardio by either doing lots and lots of sets. The ATP PC energy system, it maxes out at like 10 to 12 seconds. So if your sets are lasting 30, 40, 50 seconds, or if you are resting a very short period of time, you don't give that system enough time to actually replenish and restore so you're good to go again, then you're turning it into cardio and you're not really going to get much out of it. So low reps, long rest periods, low reps, anything in the 1 to 5 rep range is usually best for power. There are exceptions, things like pogo hops and skips and other agility drills you can definitely do for higher reps, but box jumps and speed bench press, speed deadlift, power cleans, hang cleans, medicine ball throws, things like that should be done for lower reps. I usually like 2 to 3 reps per set. And then you ideally rest about 3 minutes in between sets. Now, that can be impractical. So say you're doing 5 sets of a power exercise at the beginning of your workout and you're resting 3 minutes between each set. If you include the rest periods as well as your work periods, that's going to take you like 20 minutes. And that's a little impractical. So that's one of the reasons I like to cheat the system a little bit by resting a little less, 90 seconds to 2 minutes. It's not perfect, but it's still way better than either not resting at all or taking 25 minutes just to get your power exercises in, or doing it in between sets. So you get like 2 for the price of 1, but still, like I said, making sure you rest in between each one. And then frequency, like I said, twice a week-ish. You can do it 3 times a week. You can do it 4 times a week. The more often you do it and the more optimally you train it, the better you're going to develop it. But just to maintain it is really pretty simple. If you jump a couple times a week and throw a couple times a week and maybe do some jumping push-ups and maybe some explosive kettlebell lifts, whether it's cleans or snatches or something like that, with the intent of moving really, really explosively, not super high reps or getting really tired, then you're going to absolutely maintain it. And that's great for a lot of people because, like I said, most people don't train it and it just goes away. And basically they're at like power 0. There's a genetic component to power. Of course, some people are just naturally going to be more powerful, but if you never train it, you're going to be nowhere near your genetic potential anyway. And fast twitch muscle fiber development, which is one of the key aspects of power training, is super important because they decrease with age over time. And you never know when you're going to have to all of a sudden break into a sprint to save a kid from running out in the street, or your kid's at the top of the stairs, you're at the bottom of the stairs, he's about to go down the stairs and he's not capable of walking down the stairs himself, and you need to run up to the top of the stairs to save him. Or you have to jump off something and land, or you have to jump up onto something, or you just have to move quickly in any sort of daily, usually unexpected daily life. But if you never train power, you're not going to have that power and you're likely to get hurt, and or you're likely to make a fool out of yourself. So definitely very important, so long as you just avoid the general mistakes like doing too many reps, not resting long enough, or another big mistake that people make I haven't mentioned yet is they'll go and hammer their legs, 16, 18 sets of legs, which I think is too much for one training session anyway, but that doesn't stop anyone from doing it. And then they'll throw in some power at the end. I'll do 3 sets of 10 box jumps after I just destroyed my legs. And although certain athletes can benefit from doing power later in a training session, nobody's going to benefit from just destroying themselves and then doing power at the end. Again, fatigue is not your friend with power. You want to keep fatigue low by keeping reps low, maximum intent, very high intensity per rep. Every rep should be like max effort, but low reps, long rest periods, and higher frequency, high-ish frequency, at least twice a week would be perfect, and you should be good to go. Next question, we'll do 2 more. How long is too long for a tempo run? 40 minutes? There's no perfect answer for this. It depends on a lot of different things. It depends on whether you're just starting out or you've been doing tempo runs. It depends on what your goal is, like how far the race or the event you're training for is. If you're prepping for a marathon versus a 5K, your tempo duration is going to be different just because, for obvious reasons. Obviously, you want to get better at running for longer periods of time for that marathon. You don't really need to be able to run super duper hard for very long for a 5K, relatively speaking, between the two. So usually I like to start out with like tempo intervals, especially if someone hasn't done tempo before, or especially if it's really hot out and you don't want to just go at your tempo pace for the entire duration, because it's going to end up being very, very fatiguing because you're also dealing with the heat. By the way, if you want to learn all about heat training, listen to the last episode. I dive really deep into that, so I won't dive into it too much here. But say you are looking to run 21 minutes for tempo. I'm going to make this easy math. Instead of doing a 21-minute straight tempo run when it's super hot out, by the end of that, you're probably going to be pretty smoked, even if you are going at the desired tempo pace that you should be going at, versus if you do 3 7-minute tempo bouts with a 90-second really easy recovery jog in between each ones. You're still going to get the adaptations for running at that pace, but it's going to be a little less fatiguing because you're breaking it up with recovery periods. Also, if you're newer to running, whether the temperature's hot or not, usually people will overshoot their tempo runs, tempo paces at first before they're used to them. And a lot of people also think that tempo running should be like almost all out, if not all out. And although there's benefit to doing faster tempo runs, especially in the context of a lower running volume program, like my SFAS program, the tempo runs are really fast. Generally, if you're doing a solid, well-rounded running progression program, like if you're doing the 2 and 5 mile program, I have tempo paces in there. You're not going to be going all out. You should be able to continue running well after you finish your tempo run, even though you're not going to actually. For example, if you finish a 25-minute tempo run, and you know you couldn't run another 1 minute at that pace, you went way too hard. If you know you could run another 20 minutes at that pace, 15 minutes, probably a pretty good tempo pace. So I would just use a few little things to judge it. So if you are prepping for a half marathon or a marathon, 40-minute tempo run would absolutely be appropriate, maybe even a little bit longer. You don't want to go crazy, crazy long with tempo runs, but especially all at once without breaking them up into intervals. But you could easily get 35, 45-minute tempo run in for longer events like that. If you're prepping for a 5-miler or a 2-miler or somewhere in between, maybe start at 15-ish minutes, whether that's in intervals or 15 all at once, and work your way up to 25, 30, maybe 35, especially if you're breaking it up into intervals, you could get up to 35, but anything longer than that for that short of a distance is not all that necessary, especially because you're also most likely going to be doing speed work and maybe some quality during your long runs. So lots of nuance to it, lots of different possibilities, but just to say that there's one limit to the duration of a tempo run would be a little bit short-sighted. Next question, advice on how to get over the fear of jumping out of an airplane. My man, I am right there with you. I am very scared of jumping out of an airplane, and I've jumped out of probably 250 to 300 airplanes successfully, despite the fact that I was super scared. I will say airborne static line jumping is more terrifying than free fall jumping, although a lot of people might think it's the opposite. Until you do both, you will realize that free fall jumping is a lot less scary. You're way higher up, so the ground is less imminent. Oftentimes people are scared of heights because the ground's imminent, like they can see the ground and it's like right there, but it's still high enough to where they know if they fall, they're going to get fucked up or dead. But free fall, you're just so far away. Even when you jump out of the plane, you start falling. You don't even feel like you're falling. You just feel like there's a bunch of wind in your face. And slowly but surely the ground gets a little closer, but like it's really hard to explain unless you actually do it, but there's also more time. You have more time to make decisions and save yourself, like pull your reserve parachute and things like that. You're also packing your own parachute, so you are much more in control of your fate. You're not relying on a rigger to pack your chute and a static line to make sure that chute opens. So there's that. And you also are in more control of the landing. If you flare well and you land into the wind, you do the right things, which doesn't always happen. But if you do, it's mostly on you, whether you do or not, then you're going to be totally fine. You can stand it up, nice little walking landing. Whereas with a static line, you are closer to the ground. You're about 1,200 feet away from the ground. And depending on if you're at airborne school, I think it's like they jump you at 1,000 feet, maybe 1,200. So that's not a lot of time. You're relying on a rigger to pack your chute properly. You're relying on the static line to open your chute properly and for it to open. And then, of course, you are trying not to hit people on the way down. It's going to be a bunch of jumpers in the air. Everyone says the MC6, which you use in the Q course, it's a static line parachute, is steerable. It's not steerable. It's turnable. You can turn it, but you can't steer it. And if you turn it into the wind, of course, you're going to go with the wind. You go against the wind, you're going to kind of go slower, but neither here nor there. You're going to use a T11, I believe, in airborne school, which are not at all steerable. You can grab risers all you want, and you can like slip away. You can kind of go left and right a little bit, but it's not actually steerable. And you can never trust the jumpers around you to make the right decisions. And then, of course, let's not forget landing. Sometimes you're going to come in like a sack of bricks, depending on your size, depending on whether you are facing the right direction, and depending on some other factors too. Depending on where they threw you out, if they threw you out of the plane at the right spot or the wrong spot over the trees or something like that. So lots less in your control with static line jumping. And I realize everything I just said probably did not help you get less scared, but that's just the reality of it. And although I just said all that to explain it, the more you talk about it, the more you listen to other people talk about it, the more you watch videos of it, the more you expose yourself to similar scenarios where you're scared of being high up. I'm not saying to go like walk across cliffs or do something stupid where you're going to potentially fall and die. But the more often you expose yourself to it, whether it's watching it, doing it in a safe manner, listening to other people talk about it, reps and reps and reps, you're just going to perceive it to be less scary over time. Like I said, I was scared before pretty much every jump I did. Actually, every jump I did. But the magnitude of how scared I was on my first ever jump at airborne school compared to like my last ever free fall jump was very, very different. Like I was way less scared because I had been exposed to it way more times and I'd done it way more times. And just like anything that you're scared of, the more you do it and the more you expose yourself to it and the more you successfully accomplish whatever that is without killing yourself or hurting yourself, which obviously is always a potential possibility, the more you do it, the better you're going to be able to manage it and handle it. It's like anything. Like the first time I ever did a podcast, I was terrified and it was terrible and I was just not wanting to post it. That was probably 10, 12, 15 episodes. The very first 15 episodes I did, I was scared. I was like super nervous. First time I was ever interviewed on someone else's podcast, I was super nervous. The first time I ever had to stand up and brief a higher up like general or lieutenant colonel or colonel when I was in SF, I was super scared. But the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it and the more you're going to be able to handle those nerves. As far as acute ways to like kind of calm yourself down, I always turn to breathing exercises. Box breathing was excellent. Really, really focusing on your breathing instead of focusing on like, oh, what if this happens? What if this happens? How high up am I? What if my parachute doesn't open? Oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Oh my God, I can feel my heart beating out of my chest. You're probably going to feel that anyway, even if you do these breathing exercises. Box breathing, by the way, is 4 seconds on the inhale, 4 seconds hold at the top, 4 seconds out, 4 seconds on the bottom before you do your next inhale. And you just do that over and over again. It kind of has a nice calming effect to your nervous system. And generally what's happening when you're scared like that, especially acutely, you have this cascade of hormones like adrenaline, cortisol, they're just sky high. And if you have some way to kind of calm yourself down in situations where your body is just kind of like working against you and it's making you super duper nervous, whatever that may be for you, whether you're scared of spiders or you're scared of heights or you're scared of public speaking, those are pretty common ones. The better able you are to use your breathing to become more parasympathetic, become a little bit more relaxed. You're not going to just be chill and zen and parasympathetic, especially if you just hate jumping. Most people are not a fan of jumping. Most people are scared. I would say 99.9% of people who have ever jumped out of a plane were fucking terrified the first time they did it. And guess what? The 100th time they did it, they probably were significantly less scared. And the 200th time, way less scared. Some people who are like skydive junkies may not really feel that fear. I think it's healthy to feel fear for a dangerous thing like that. But some people just don't really have that gene in them. They're not wired that way. But most people are. And really the only option if you want to accomplish whatever you're setting out to do in the military that involves being airborne qualified and continuing to maintain your airborne proficiency, which means jumping every 3 months at least, you're going to just have to figure out a way to do it. Or because you are unable to overcome this fear, you're going to allow that opportunity to pass you by. And that's probably something you will look back on and regret. So doing things that puts you outside of your comfort zone is a massive thing that more people need to do. We're just all used to just being in our comfort zone all the time. And if you never push yourself outside your comfort zone, honestly, you can practice with other things. Usually if you're scared of heights, there's probably something else that's a little bit more accessible that you can kind of do on a more regular basis than, go high up or watch videos of people jumping out of planes or climbing on the outside of buildings or something like that. There's probably something you can do almost every day. Like if you're scared to talk to strangers, go talk to strangers. If you're scared to public speak, join Toastmasters and practice it and expose yourself to it. And over time, the magnitude of that fear is going to be a little bit less, and you're going to have the courage to continue and do things that scare you and go outside your comfort zone because you're just going to be more used to it. You're going to perceive it as less of a threat. And lastly, the definition of courage is something a lot of people overlook or get wrong. Courage means to have fear and still do the thing that causes that fear. Whereas people think courage means you're fearless. You just don't even feel the fear, so you do it. And although some people have like genetic makeups they're wired that way and they just don't really have fear for anything, most people don't. And the people who have the most courage are the ones that are able to just get themselves to do it. And oh, by the way, slowly exposing yourself to that scenario a little bit more often is a great way to develop the courage and the ability to overcome that fear and still go do it. So definitely went off on a crazy tangent on that one, but I can really relate to you because I hate heights, absolutely hate heights. When I watch a movie scene where people are like fighting on the edge of a cliff or they're scaling a building, a skyscraper, or like the show Masters of the Air where they're just flying the bombers and guys are like falling out of the planes and they're getting hit really high up and the planes are going down and guys are having to parachute and bail out. That shit terrifies me. My palms are sweating like right now thinking about it. So I promise you it can be done. You just got to do it. And the more often you do it, the less scared you'll be. It may be a big time leap of faith that first time. Try to use that breathing technique and get yourself a little bit calmed down, or really whatever other technique allows you to just kind of calm your nerves down and be more present and get that cascade of neurotransmitters like adrenaline to kind of calm down, and you're going to be good to go. So that's my best advice to you. Best of luck. Go do it. You'll be glad you did. And you won't have that regret looking back on, I would have been SF or I would have been airborne, but I decided that I was too scared to jump out of the plane and I am unable to overcome my fears. So go send it. Best of luck. And that's it, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in today. I'll be back soon with another episode. Till then, Terminator out.